Hi, my name's Christian. I'm just another guy who happens to be trans, and this is my buddy Anthony. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm kind of nervous about this, but it's okay. As I've talked to you before, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say I have to say that like intro music had me going. I feel good about that. That was nice. That
Yeah,
was-
I like it. I like it. So we're gonna see how this goes, and hopefully it goes well, and we won't have to re-record it again.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
crossing my fingers. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it on the first take. I believe in us.
I, I believe in us. I don't know if I believe in my use of technology.
No,
So,
you got this.
um,
I have full faith and confidence in you.
well, thank you. As I talked to you before, I talked to you about how I kind of wanted to start a YouTube channel for guys, showing guys who've been transitioning over 10 plus years, because I feel like we were in an era where it wasn't okay to be trans, and transitioning was not this normal thing. And at least for me, like I was telling you, the only trans people I ever saw was like guys going on talk shows for like Maury or something. So I didn't really have a lot of examples per se of what trans was. And I had to learn from other guys, even how much testosterone to take, because we were teaching our own doctors and things like that. And so that's kind of why I started the channel, and I talked to you, and we actually have a lot in common with our transition histories.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that we have to teach our own doctors because I feel like there's still even now some of that still going on. Like I probably see I can't even tell you how often guys talking about their doctors sort of giving them almost double the dose of what I was originally told was like normal for what we should be on. And so yeah, that's I mean it's we've come so far, and then it's I'm reminded of still how far we have to go all the time. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think it also depends on what state you're in. I live in,
definitely.
Southern California. So I kind of live in a bubble. I'm told I live in a bubble. I don't experience a lot of prejudice per se. And so, and I have Kaiser before I even changed my name legally. Kaiser just changed it in their system. Like I haven't had a lot of issues in that sense. I've always had doctors who are pretty good, and we just have a lot of different types of people that live in LA. So I think I've just been blessed because from guys that aren't from here and live in more conservative states, I think that might be a little different.
Yeah, and it was definitely different. So I'm from North Carolina, and I live in Michigan now, not too far out of Detroit. But when I originally came here, I was just out of Ann Arbor, which is a very progressive place to be. It's very just a kind of a lot more enlightened, I think, with trans issues and with a lot of other kind of social issues. And it was one of those that when I started up here in the healthcare system, I hadn't legally changed my name either, but a lot of my doctor's offices and things did allow for preferred names, and they were very, very respectful. And I knock on wood, I have not had an issue here in Michigan with any of my trans related care, but it definitely it wasn't always that way in North Carolina when I lived there.
Yeah. Well, it's North Carolina,
Yeah,
so
North Carolina is definitely a much more conservative place to be. I mean, I'm sure everybody remembers the bathroom bill that they passed a few years ago. Yeah. That's my
those
home
are fun.
state. that's,
Yeah.
that's my home state.
Yeah. Well, I just want to start off with the questions, because I have learned how to use these handy dandy buttons, and I want to see if it works. So hopefully it does. So the first thing I want to talk about is, how long you've been transitioning from, the body you were born into the man you really are. And, how long has that been?
Yeah, so I started socially transitioning at about 17, but I didn't start medically transitioning until I was almost 20. I think I was like maybe 2, 3 months shy of my 20th birthday when I started testosterone. And I was on testosterone for a number of years. I think about maybe 8 years before I got my top surgery. About 2 more years after that, I had my hysterectomy and everything like that. So it's been, a number of years, kind of spread out. But I was pretty lucky when I moved to Michigan to have really trans-friendly insurance that covered a lot of it.
Right.
Yeah, so it definitely made the last bit of it quite a lot easier.
Yeah, I think I was, it's been so long ago, and I was never one of those trans guys who's ever good at like writing down my first shot, writing down like when my doctor tells me, "Oh, it's been this long since you got your top surgery." I'm like, "Oh, it has." I always relearn it because it's just, I don't know. I've always been this guy, and it was just something I did. And
Yeah,
dates have never been my strong suit. I have three brothers and three sisters, and I kind of know with some of them what months their birthdays are. I don't honestly know all their ages. When doctors ask me, I'm like, oh, well, my oldest brother's from age 40 to something. My second one is from 30 to something. Kind of remembering when we were in high school and they were older or younger than me, like how many grades we were apart.
yeah.
But that's just never been my strong suit. But
I
like for, yeah.
Yeah, admittedly, I'm the same way. I'm one of 8 kids, so for us, like, yeah, I'm in that same boat of like, I vaguely know how old they are. Like, I know about how
Yeah.
much older or younger they are than me, but it doesn't really help when I forget how old I am sometimes. So I'm just like, I don't know. There's somewhere in that age. Like, I give like a 5 year age bracket of like they could be somewhere in that age, but no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
When
Yeah.
when I was doing my credit report, they're like, "How old are your siblings?" And I think I got a question wrong, and so I couldn't like pass something for verification. I felt so dumb,
Yeah.
but it happens when you
I
have three
remember.
brothers and three sisters.
Yeah, I for sure. Yeah, I've got 2 brothers and 5 sisters, and I'm like, I kind of know about when they were born, and then it gets even more complicated because um of my siblings, there's only one other that doesn't have kids. It's my very youngest. She's 14, so like
Yeah,
obviously she doesn't have kids. I mean, we're holding off on that hopefully for a very long time. But my younger brother just had a kid last year. All of my siblings have at least one on average. They've got about 4 apiece, and then now
yeah,
I have great nieces and nephews, and so I'm just like, I gave up learning. I know their names.
yeah. I
That's
think that's important.
yeah. I know
Well,
their names. I have no idea when they were born. Not a month, vaguely a year. I kind of know how old they're, but not really. No. Yeah. No.
yeah. I guess that's life with big families. So
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
now,
Yeah.
now, how long have you actually been transitioning, and how? I mean, you've been transitioning. I would ask you that one, but how did you make the decision to transition? Did you do pros and cons? Like, how did that work out for you?
I definitely did a lot of pros and cons, and at the time that I transitioned, it was still under sort of the old rules for best practices of care with trans folks, which required when I started hormone therapy, I had to see a mental health professional for 3 to 6 months, and I think I saw about maybe three to four, and got the letters and of support and like the write ups, and they did all
Right.
the psychological tests and stuff like that. But it was really just it was the right decision for me. I mean, I just kind of, I mean, I knew that it was just something that I knew in my heart. And I felt that this was kind of the only way that I would ever sort of find peace in my own body and in my own
Right.
skin and have that comfortability. But I mean, it's definitely like, at the time when I started testosterone, I had to sign a waiver that essentially said, like, hey, I understand that starting testosterone could potentially cut years off of my life, which is
Right.
not you want to sign at like 19. But it was one of those that I was like in my mind, I was like, I would rather die tomorrow as who I am than live to be 100 and not ever be happy or comfortable in my own skin. And that's really
Yeah.
what it comes down to for me.
Well, like some of the pros and cons I had to look at, and what we talked about before was I had to really think well, my family's Mormon, they're very conservative, and is this something they're going to accept? They, were respectful of the quote unquote being a lesbian or whatever. They didn't like it, but they were just like, we love you, and we don't get it, but they just wanted me in their life. But it wasn't like a fun thing. But I had to really be like, okay, am I okay with not having my family in my life? They're not going to accept me and everything like that. And I was, I was planning on living a double life for a while. Like I was Christian in one area, and then I was, my birth name in another one.
Yeah.
And I did that for a while. And then I did not go the right way for hormones. I was under my parents' insurance, so I couldn't do that. I had to get them illegally, which I don't recommend to anyone. And I started really slow. I started really slow because I wasn't sure. I was like, well, I'm not sure about anything. I question myself all the time. And, but I thought, well, if I get facial hair and a deep voice, then I'm okay, because I knew some effects always last. But I guess like most women don't want facial hair or a very deep voice. So, it was just my fears. But I had
Yeah.
already been going to like trans groups for a long time, and kind of been living as male outside of my family. In the public I was already. So I'm I'm really glad I made the decision, because when I started hormones, I calmed down a
Yeah.
lot. Like I felt better.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I noticed, is that I calmed down, and I felt really just more comfortable, not just with myself, but like with my place in the world. And I mean, I had been in high school. I was very fortunate. I lived right outside of Charlotte, and I would go to Charlotte once a week because they had a support group for LGBTQ youth. And
Right.
that was really kind of my first introduction. I mean, when I started going, I identified as a lesbian. Because I didn't really have the sort of language or vocabulary, but
Right.
I sort of felt that that label didn't really fit. It never really felt right. And then I started going to this group in Charlotte, and got more exposure, and met other trans guys, not only my age, but also, some that were a bit older, who kind of gave me a little bit more hope, and I guess an example to look to know that this was something that I could do, and be happy. And I mean, when I started transition, my only goal was to be able to pee safely in the men's room. And of course, like I ended up, I mean, just had every intention of just like getting my transition over, and just like, assimilating into, hetero cis-normative society, and just being myself. And then in when I was in college in Charlotte, a good friend of mine sort of voluntold me to join it was a committee of student, staff, and faculty at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, that were essentially working together to try to make the campus just more trans friendly in general, just a more welcoming and inviting place for trans students. And I was sort of reluctant. I was like, I don't really want to, I didn't really ever intend to be an activist. Like, I didn't really, I
Right.
just be myself. And
Right.
the way and they sort of became a mentor to me, but the way they kind of put it was, you know, nobody else is really going to be stepping up to this. And, there's not a lot of people who are really signing up for this, but he's like, or they were like, I think you'd be really good at this. And I think that this is something that, you could lend your voice to, and help a lot of people. And after that, I was like, well, I guess now I have to do it.
Right.
You're making it really hard to say no here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I know when I did activism work with Prop 8 and just different, I was one of the first trans people knew.
Yeah.
And, I just, once I got on hormones and I started, seeing myself as the man I am, I wanted to kind of hide away, and I did for a minute. I just wanted to be normal. I was tired of being like the token gay person or the token trans person, or, whatever that is. But it's just like we need to have, if there were so many of us to be a good example, we would have a bunch. And we do have a bunch. We do have a lot of people who do a lot of different things. Um, we have models now, we have, comedians, just all sorts of different people. But I didn't know them when I was at the beginning of the transition. It wasn't on media. You didn't see them on TV. YouTube was barely starting. People were barely starting their transitions on YouTube. I'd watch young kids transitioning online. I didn't have a computer with a webcam.
Yeah.
Even though my parents made decent money, they were really into like, you have to work for your own stuff. And I just didn't, have those things. And so I just think it's interesting, like certain people or certain communities, because our community is so small. If we want what we want to have the rights that I think that we deserve, we have to be the ones to say something.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah. And I think and I think you kind of touched on something when you said that you were the only trans person that a lot of people knew. And I think what my activism for me did was put a face on trans people to sort of show that we were just like any other group of people. And there was
Right.
a moment where we had a consultant come to UNC Charlotte to talk to this committee that I was on, and ask the question of this group of people that I had been working with at that point for 2 or 3 years. How many of you know a trans student? And like
Right.
nobody in the room raised their hand. And I literally just kind of like side-eyed everybody. And I was like, hello, we've known each other for a long time, guys. Like
Right.
we've been working together actively. You know that I'm, the only student on this committee, and I'm doing it because I'm trans. And they were like, oh right, we totally forgot. And I was like, it's flattering. I appreciate that, but also at the same time, like, you have to remember that we do exist, and because we exist, we do need to kind of be actively sort of pushing this work through, and pushing these policies through to make it easier for those of us who aren't as comfortable being in a room full of people and saying, hey,
Right.
I'm trans, like I'm different, I'm different than you in a way that doesn't seem very different, but also makes my entire experience a little bit different. So
Yeah.
that's,
It's interesting because I have family who, like, they support me and they love me. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't act like, I know they're not. If there was certain transgender bills, I know they're not going to vote for them, unfortunately. Now, I'm not
yeah.
saying all my siblings are like that or all my cousins and aunts and uncles are like that, but I do know there is a, let's agree to disagree. I respect you, but I don't, and I love you, but I don't want this to, like, you know, make America burn up in flames or whatever. I don't know what they think.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you've got a question here in just a minute about family and things like that, but I have to say that I am really extremely blessed in as far as my family goes. It took my dad a while to come around, but my mom um, was living in North Carolina when. Oh, see, there you go. The next question. Yeah, how have my friends and family been with it since from the beginning to now? My mom, I love my mom to death, but at first, I told her when I was 17 years old, and the first thing that the way that she responded was that she thought it was just a phase, which is
Right.
not common. Like I think most of us have in this community have heard that from parents, loved ones, etc. But it took her a couple years to really come around. My dad, when I first told him, he and I brought a friend along with me for moral support because I kind of
Yeah.
knew that he wasn't going to handle it exceptionally well.
Right.
And I told him, and I was really nervous about it. And he looked at me and he was like, "So what are you going to come out as next? A zebra?" And I was and I reminded him this, and it's not to go into it fully, but a few years after this, I was at a psychiatric hospital for depression and for other things. And my dad came to pick me up. It was a couple hours from where we lived. And we did a family therapy session, and he was in there and he was like, I think about that all the time. And I just, as soon as I said it, I knew that it was the wrong thing to say. And I just didn't know how to walk that comment back. And I just kind of looked at
Right.
him like, Dad, I really appreciate that. Like, you've kind of been beating yourself up about this, but I was like, honestly, I tell this now to my friends and to my colleagues and the people that I work with doing this kind of work. And, I use it as sort of a way to say, like, that was not a terrific way to respond. Yes, absolutely correct. But I was like, it is kind of a funny little comment of just like,
Yeah.
one of the weird random things that we get told when we come out. And my dad, bless his heart, has since come around. He's my aunt, his sister is a lesbian and has been involved in
Okay.
the community for a long time. And she finally sat him down more than once, I'm told, and was like, "Do you understand like what your son is going through? Like how many hoops he has to jump through, how many doctors he has to talk to, how many like many times he has to get his head shrunk, how expensive this is, how much discrimination he faces." Like went down the whole and just read him the riot act. And finally, he was like, "Oh yeah, maybe I should do like
Oops.
the bare minimum and call him he and use the correct name." And I mean my parents even now, and I've been out to my mom since I was 17, my dad since I was about 19. And they struggle even now. You know, they'll use the wrong name or pronouns, but they do usually work really hard to make sure that they're being respectful and that they correct themselves. And I've had to go back and forth with my mom, who my mom is very supportive and progressive and just super liberal. But is very pronoun challenged, to use a word from one of her coworkers. She was working in a hospital once, and she was talking to one of the doctors, and like could not get the right pronoun. Like she went back and forth for a couple minutes, and this doctor
Yeah.
looked at her like, "Does your son know how pronoun challenged you are? Like, is that?" And she's like, "Yes, he knows. It's an issue. We're working on it." But I mean, it's one of those that we've had the conversation now of like, when you mess up, it's not a big deal. It's just correct yourself and move on. Like you don't have to apologize. You don't have to, explain, why this was, because you've known me since, before I was born and all that. And I was like, that you
Right.
don't need it. Just say, "Oh, he," and then move on. And that's it. That's
Right.
for anyone watching who's not trans, who struggles with that. It's really that easy. Just correct yourself and move on. It's not the end of the world. We don't take it like super personally, most of us. It's just correct yourself and move on. It's don't apologize and then make us be the one to say, "Oh no, it's okay, it's fine, it's cool," because that puts us in an awkward position, and it's just a whole thing. It's
Right.
just
Or
um,
when they blow it up and then we are like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So it's now a big,
a much bigger deal
hoopla.
than it really should have been. Like, yeah. But I mean, my siblings were really fantastic. Like, they struggled a little bit. My younger one, when I came out, my youngest sister was uh, maybe a few weeks old, and my mom adopted her when she was 2.5. So she is
Right.
not ever know. I mean, she's never known me by any other name, by any other pronouns. But most of my siblings and my nieces and nephews were very respectful. Even the ones that my nieces and nephews who are a little older
Right.
were really really supportive, especially at the beginning. My oldest niece, in fact, she's only 2 years younger than I am, but we were in the kitchen one day and she was talking about, oh, one of my other sisters is her favorite aunt, and I was like, "Oh, am I not in the consideration?" And she was like, "You're my uncle," and I was like, "You're my favorite. I just you're the best right now. I just don't tell the others, but you were the favorite right at this moment." So I mean, most of them were quite wonderful, and my um, one of my nieces actually came out a couple years ago as, I think, pansexual. She's
Okay.
bi or pan. It's not like we've never had like a direct conversation about it. She just started bringing home women and men, and I was like, okay, this is just normal for our family. Like nobody batted an eye. She's super queer. No one even. They're just like, oh, okay, this is just one of those truths that we accept in our family. It's just accept it and move on, and this is just who we are. So
Yeah, my family, my nieces and nephews were all really young. So everyone just went to Christian. And I don't even think the kids really, like, they're still really young. I don't think they remember who I was prior. But
yeah,
then one of my sisters, she was like, you're gonna confuse them. So now, so all the all my siblings but one, my, nephews came over and they were counting the kids and they're like, we're missing somebody because I disappeared,
right.
and
Yeah,
it's something I've had to come to terms with in therapy, but that's not my place to do that for my sister. But
yeah,
her kids are going to be really confused because nobody else has the problem because they did it so young that it
right.
wasn't a big deal. Now sons are teenagers, and one of them's like, where did this person go? We have you have a sibling that just disappeared off the face of the earth,
Yeah.
and I just said, go talk to your mom about that, because I don't know, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. And
Right.
I don't see them enough. It's not like I see them all the time. If I saw them all the time, that would be one thing, but I just mainly see them for holidays.
Yeah.
So
And actually, one of my favorite stories with my nephew. He's 14 now, and he was actually the very first person that I came out to when he was like 6 weeks old. So he has obviously memory of this, but like we were walking around our neighborhood, and I distinctly have this memory of like I had him in a stroller, and I kind of picked him up because he got fussy, and I was like, buddy, I just want to let you know, like you'll probably hear me called a lot of different things in your life, but I just want you to know from me that I am your Uncle Anthony, and this is who I am. And it doesn't change that I love you, because I love you, and I've been there since before you were born. And I hope that it doesn't change how you feel. And a few years after that, I think he was about 6 or 7. We were over at my dad's for the holiday, and he was doing something under the table that he wasn't supposed to. So I called him on. I called him out, and um, told him to get out from under the table, and he sort of back talked me a little bit. And my sister comes in the room and goes, "You don't back talk her, hit her." And he just looks at her, and I'm just trying not to laugh at this point, but he looks at her so serious, and he goes, "Mama, he's a boy." And just, and my sister goes, "I know that, damn it, go away."
that's funny.
And I'm just trying not to die laughing, because like he absolutely just nailed it, and just had this cheeky, like he kind of grinned at me like, I don't know what mama's problem is, but I know that you're a boy.
Mama, he's a boy.
Hey, mama, he's a boy.
He's a boy.
He's a boy.
Now, that's funny. Now, what were you like as a child, a teenager, like an adult in relationship to your manhood, I guess? Like, what did you see yourself with other guys? Did you hang out with girls? What was it like?
Yeah, so when I was really young, I hung out with a lot of guys. I was very, tomboyish. I played sports. I, was very, I wasn't big into getting dirty, but that was because from the time I was like 3, I wanted to be a doctor, and I was just very, very concerned. Like I washed my hands regularly and properly. Like I was just really not into getting dirty a lot. But I mean, I played sports. I played baseball, soccer, everything like that. And then it got to be a point where I know it's hard to tell on screen, but I'm very, very short. I'm only on a good day 4'11". And so there came a time where I stopped growing and everybody else grew a lot. And my mom was like, I don't think you should play contact sports anymore. That's probably not a good idea. But like I remember as a kid, maybe 3-4 years old, practicing shaving in the mirror. Like my parents got divorced when I was really young, and I would stay with my dad on the weekends. And I remember getting up when I was probably 2-3 years old, and he would put me on the sink and just let me watch him shave. And that was like my favorite. That was the highlight of my weekend. I just loved watching him shave. And when I got a little older, I would practice shaving in the mirror, and now I have a full beard and almost never shave. So it's definitely come a long way there. But I mean, I was always I think into teenage years, I definitely started hanging out more with women. Most of my best friends currently are women. I've got a few close guy friends that I'm in touch with, that I've been in touch with, some for years, some over the last couple of years in my graduate program and things like that. But it was definitely I definitely gravitate more toward queer women and non-binary folks and trans folks than I do really, but anybody, cis, pets, anything. So yeah, I think it has probably more to do with their sexual and gender identity than it does their how they were assigned at birth. But yeah, I definitely tend to gravitate more from teenage years into adulthood, more toward women and queer folks as far as friendships.
Yeah, I think, like, I was raised in church. So in the Mormon faith, you go to church all the time. So I was raised around a lot of girls.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd go to church in dresses and everything, but then I'd come home and skateboard
Yep.
and play, you know, street hockey. We didn't always have rollerblades when we were really young because it was too dangerous, but we play street hockey with our shoes on, played cops and robbers and everything like that. So like I always felt very at two different ends of the spectrum. I played sports. I didn't want to play softball. I was not going to play softball to save my life, but I played baseball for a year with, and I was the only girl on the team, quote unquote, you know. And I played basketball, and I was always, I know the guys wouldn't ever give me the basketball, and so I had to go in and take it myself. And so I was really aggressive,
Yeah.
a young aggressive kid, doing that. And I'm comfortable around women. um, I like hanging out with guys too. Um, I I like people who are, you know, in the queer spectrum, as long as somebody's not too extremist. When people are too extreme, whether it's conservative or liberal, it freaks me out.
I could see that. Yeah.
A lot because I share a lot of, you know, liberal views. I also share a lot of conservative views, and so it's always, you know, I'm always been trying to find my place in the queer community
Yeah.
because
Yeah. And it's early in college. I went to a very just painfully progressive university my first year. Um, and it was great, but I was pretty stealth my first year in transition. I was 21, and I tried to join their queer organization, and I was very male presenting. I essentially, for all intents and purposes, was a straight man on campus, and I went and I felt very uncomfortable in their queer organization because everybody that there, because I mean, we didn't necessarily say our identities at the beginning of the meeting, like that. It's you
right,
rarely have meetings where you do that, but I was definitely treated like an outsider from the get, and I was like, I'm a part of, like, I'm not an ally in this community. I belong in this community, but I never really felt like I fit in that community. But I mean, I definitely what you're saying about going to church all the time. I was raised Baptist, in a very conservative environment. And I mean, I did, wore dresses to church, and, we went at least twice a week. My grandmother did the vacation Bible school there for 30 years. She was the executive
okay,
director of their vacation Bible school for 30 years. So, like, we were
yeah,
very
that's
active in
cool,
church. Yeah. And I
yeah,
remember, though, like, and like growing up, and when I started transition, my grandmother was like the only person that I'd never really told. But before she died, in like the last couple of years, she sort of figured it out because I had a deep voice and I had grown a beard, and like
yeah.
it clicked. At some point she was like, "Oh, okay, all right, this is what's going on."
I would hope so.
And I didn't. I mean, my grandmother again had been Baptist for as long as I could remember. I'd always been very religious, and I definitely thought that she was gonna, not react well and not be supportive. And it was like a year, I think less than a year before she died. We were at her birthday, and she was just kind of sitting in the chair, and she looked at me, and she was like, "You are just very beautiful. I mean, handsome, but you're too pale. I think you have thin blood." And I was like, I don't know how to take that compliment. Like, thank you so much for honoring my gender identity and for using like the right compliment there. But like, I don't think I have thin blood. I think I'm just like allergic to the sunshine, and I'm really pale because of that. Um,
Yeah,
but but I mean, even in church environments, like I hung out with in the Baptist church down south. We have kind of a boys group and a girls group, and my grandparents were over the RA group, which is the boys group. So I got to get out of my mission friends, which is like the little kids group, and go and hang out with the boys all the time. And like anytime
yeah,
my grandparents taught them how to like shoot a gun out, because we're from the south and that's what you do. I think
okay,
I was like 3 years old, and I remember I got to hang out with them because my grandfather was like, if you're gonna be around guns, because we're in the south, then you need to like learn how to shoot it properly and learn how to take care of it and learn gun safety and all that. And so like I went and got to hang out and learn that. Why we were learning it at church, I have no idea. That's just what you do in the south, I guess.
I
Yeah.
don't know. You had to be. I don't even know if my brothers did. I know my brothers had Boy Scouts. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be a Girl Scout. I just wanted to be a Boy Scout. And I thought, woe is me. My life is so hard. I have to wear dresses. And I don't get to do all the fun stuff because all the boys did all the fun stuff, and I had to learn how to sew, and I didn't want to learn how to sew, you know.
I think
So you know,
the really cool thing about the way that my mom raised us, because my mom for most of my childhood was a single mother, and she, it was me and my two brothers that she had at the time, and my mom um, was very adamant that we all learn how to cook, clean, and sew, so that we didn't have to like choose between getting married and starving to death, or like having holes in our clothes and things like that. So we all learned, those. And then she was also and still is very committed to all children having baby dolls, like you know, uh,
oh yeah,
yeah, because I mean it teaches you nurturing. It teaches you. She was always really passionate about finding dolls that looked like us, and now when she makes dolls and donates dolls, she tries to make sure that she donates dolls that don't just look like the blonde blue-eyed carbon copy dolls. She tries to get
yeah,
a mix. Like she's making one for my godson now that's he's biracial, and she's
okay,
trying to make one that looks like him so that he actually has a baby doll to learn how to love something, something that looks like him. But it was funny because my mom, so when my brothers and I were younger, they were always really gentle and really nurturing with their baby dolls, and I used them for surgery, and I think I took out probably a dozen or so appendixes, probably 2 dozen tonsils. Like just I was always doing surgery on my dolls while my brothers were like taking really nice care. And my brothers now, they both have children. My older brother has 2 kids. My younger brother just had a baby last year with his wife, and they're both wonderful, gentle, nurturing fathers who are, I mean, just really involved with their kids' lives, and just absolutely just top notch fathers. So I definitely think that there is a connection there between teaching kids from a young age how to be nurturing and how to be caring and loving with an infant and with a baby, and how they grow up and become parents. So that was
yeah. I never thought about
basically
that.
cool. Hmm?
Yeah, I didn't ever think. I've never thought about that. I've seen like boys and girls with little baby dolls, but I never knew what the connection was. I don't know why. I just didn't put two and two together.
Yeah, dolls have been, and this is totally off topic, but in my family, dolls were always a really, kind of a really big thing. I have a great aunt, my grandmother's youngest sister, who every year she puts on this event that is like a tea party, where little girls and whoever can, they go and they pay like $1 and they can go and have a tea party with their doll, and all of the profits from the event actually goes to purchasing dolls for underprivileged kids who probably wouldn't get
Oh,
one. And it's just something that's always been it's been for as long as I can remember a passion project of hers, just because we always sort of grew up with that mentality of like, you need to be able to care for something, or learn to care for something that looks like you, in order to sort of grow up learning how to love yourself, is sort of the idea that my family has. So it's something that we've always been, I mean, across my entire family has always been really passionate about.
I think
Just
that's pretty
back.
cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Now let's get back on. I think that's awesome because you see like kids nowadays with identity, being able to have like, let's talk about internalized transphobia, right? Like
Yeah.
how we don't see a lot of ourselves out there, so people tell us different things, they bully us or whatever the case may be, and so we start, even without knowing, subconsciously we start picking ourselves apart and not loving ourselves because we don't see ourselves. So if we don't see people loving us, how are we supposed to love ourselves? And when we get mixed messages from other people saying, oh, God's saying this is wrong, or you shouldn't have this right, or you have to do this, or you have to do that.
Yeah. And I think that some of those attitudes are starting to change. I was really surprised, particularly surprised. When my grandmother passed away about 7-8 years ago, her funeral was attended by like my Sunday school teachers and like people that I'd
Right.
known literally since I was born. And I really kind of expected them to, this was the first time I'd seen them since I transitioned, and I really sort of expected a negative reaction because that's what I assumed I would get. And
Right.
I was kind of blown away that, you know, most of them were just like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Checks out. Totally fine. Like immediately they went to using the correct name, the pronouns, like switched like retroactively. One of my Sunday school teachers got up and told a story about how, you know, my grandmother used to take us to church when we were little, and you know, didn't mess up my pronouns once in the telling of the story. And I was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that just, I mean, it really truly just blew my mind, because I'd always gotten those messages in church about, like, you know, being queer is wrong, being gay is wrong, being this and that, being different is wrong. And this was sort
Yeah.
of most different that I could be. And yet, you know, I found that acceptance, which again was a wonderful, pleasant surprise, but also, yeah, just a huge shock.
Um, Now, like, I know, like, we've both talked about our relationships and how we've been in some interesting, you know, relationship dynamics. And I know after I had a couple of my, you know, girlfriends, um, one of the last relationships, I know one of my fears was, will anyone ever love me this way? When before I had surgery, before I had started hormones, I only dated usually straight or bisexual women, but they knew what they were getting into from the jump. And then, but once I started looking male like I am, then I found it harder to date and more a fear that I'm not going to be accepted, um, which seems odd to me. But like, can you talk
Yeah,
about that with you? And
I I definitely understand what you mean. So it's funny, my therapist literally and I were just talking about this like 2 days ago. Because my last year, my wife and I of we were together, we were married for 5 years, or we would have been married for 5 years as of last year. And I split up. And so like going back and thinking just the idea of dating now, just, I mean, it makes me so anxious, because I'm like, you know, or is, you know, is anybody going to be accepting? Like, do I date,
right,
like, can I date straight women? Like, is that a thing? Or should I just only go for queer women? Or like, because like obviously like it's like in the trans community, especially early on, like I definitely dated a lot, my fair share of lesbians. I dated a lot of bisexual women. My ex-wife was pansexual, so like I've always dated queer women, and now I'm at a point where like I've had, you know, most of my surgeries. I've been on testosterone for a long time. I've lived full time as a man for, you know, X number of years, and like I still am just really, I get that kind of pit in my stomach of like, oh my god, are they going to reject me because I'm trans? Like, is that a deal breaker for them? And you know, I think the reality probably is it the reality is probably not as severe or as extreme as what I make it out in my head. Like I'm sure that there are plenty of
right,
straight women who are like, yeah, I don't care if you were born with a penis as long as you like, you know, treat me with respect and you're kind and like you're not a dick. But
right.
but it's like I still have that fear in my mind, and again, some of it is rational, some of it is not, of just like, oh my god, I'm going to be rejected by every woman I try to date ever for the rest of my life, which I know is insane. I know in my out loud voice, like my therapist and I say, in my out loud voice, I know how ridiculous that sounds, but there's definitely that fear of just like, I'm going to be rejected because, and it's, you know, I mean, it really, and it's a stumbling block, but I think a lot of the ways that I've sort of overcome it in the past is just really sort of understanding that, you know, I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Even if, I
Right,
mean, you know, not just because of my genitals, just because of like who I am as a person. Not everybody is going to accept me or like me for who I am
right.
anyway. So, and dating is really no different in that regard. But again, that's easier said than done. Like, you know, it still makes it really, you know, I still get really anxious when I think about asking women out and talking to women and things like that and starting any relationship. So it's, yeah, there's definitely, there's a lot there to unpack, I think.
I know. So I'm I have some new guy friends in my life that are cisgendered straight guys, and I like this new person, and you know, my insecurities come where, what if people, I think she's pretty, what if no one else thinks she's pretty and everybody thinks she's a dog? Or what if, you know, I, you know, like, I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm a really shallow person, but I want people to think who I like is good too. You
Yeah,
know, it's that insecurity from not feeling like I was okay since I
yeah,
was really young, just wanting people's approval. And I don't think that's a weird trans thing for anyone. It's just a person thing. Because I
yeah,
thought, like, there are times that I think what I'm thinking is applying because I'm trans. And like my guy friends who are normal, square, cisgender straight guys, they're like, no, we think that too. We always want arm candy on our arm. We always think about what other men are going to think about us, you know.
yeah,
And I was thinking, like, I think trans guys, and I just think trans people are more similar than cisgender people than maybe people think they are. I always like to have an eclectic group of friends
hmm,
so I can have different opinions. And I sometimes I relate more to cisgender people than I do to trans people because I'm not like you know super liberal, and
yeah,
so it's just interesting. I think we all, whatever is our shtick, trans is one of my sticks. We just get insecure,
yeah,
and I just think because of my trans history that I have a little bit more to be insecure about. But I know women find confidence sexy, so I know whoever I do end up with or end up dating, if I don't question myself constantly, I think I'll be okay.
yeah, definitely. And it's so funny that you bring up kind of the whole, everybody sort of wants arm candy thing. Um, this is terrible, but my ex-wife, for the first like 4 or 5 years that we were together, and like even a few times after, my older brother, called her the hot one. Yeah, I mean, that was he said it to my face too. He never said it when she was around. So like I had to, relay this back to her, but I was like, yeah, he calls you the hot one. I don't even think he knows your name. And we've been together for 4 years. Like this is, but it was one of those that like that was sort of important to me. And I didn't really realize until he started doing that it was something that was important to me. And now sort of after our relationship has, come to an end, and we've kind of moved apart and separated, and everything like that. I've been sort of reflecting on that, and thinking about that a lot more. And my thought is, I was like, part of me was really super jazzed and super amped to have that like validation of like the person I was with was really attractive, according to my brother, and according to, a lot of my other siblings and a lot of other, friends and people in my life. And, part of me was like, yeah, that's really fantastic, but it would have been a lot better had we also been more compatible. Had we,
Right.
had I also been with somebody who, um, had better communication skills, had, a vested interest in things that I enjoy doing. Because at the end of the day, and I mean, things with my ex fell apart the way that they did, and it's, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, we didn't have a lot that we were compatible on, and we didn't have a lot that like a lot of the same interests. We didn't have my ex is was before the pandemic, a stripper for most of the time that we were married, and I hate strip clubs. It's not even like I don't like what they do. It's just walking into a strip club, I get so anxious and overwhelmed because there's so many lights, there's so much noise, it's dark, it's foggy, it's like, and there are naked women everywhere, which naked strangers, regardless of who they are, naked strangers just make me anxious in general. And so being around so many naked women all the time, because we'd have to, she'd drag me in there all the time. And I was like, this is hell for me. These women are lovely. They're wonderful human beings. They're fantastic when they're, not trying, like, because they knew I wasn't a customer, so they were actually got to be normal people around me, which was really refreshing. But at the same time, it was like I'd, be sitting at the table with this woman who was like mostly naked, and I was like, this is just my normal, and this is very weird. This is very uncomfortable for me. And so it's just, kind of those instances of just like she was completely home in that environment, and I was like, not even remotely. I mean, I was like I remember one time we went into, she had a competition out at a club out west in Michigan, and there were two strippers who actually stripped me because I looked too uptight. Like one of them, she was doing this competition, and I went up to tip one of her competitors before the competition really started, and she was like, "Oh, honey, no," and she like unbuttoned my top two buttons on my shirt, and then like another girl later on the night was like, "No, you still," and she unbuttoned like the bottom buttons, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. This is very weird. I am super uptight, and now you are making me appear more comfortable than I really am, and I'm just sweating. So yeah, it's just, but I mean, it really, in that instance, if I had a chance to do it all over again, and I mean, I don't regret what happened. I found a lovely family that I now belong to as a result of it, and that's how I have my godson, and I'm very very involved with his life. So I don't regret it. But if I kind of had the option to do it all over again, I think what I would have told my younger self is like, yeah, it's really great that she's hot, but like maybe look for somebody who's you're compatible with, somebody that you have things in
Yeah.
common with, somebody that like likes the same things that you like, which is such a low bar, I think, but it's so important. It's so important. But you don't know that I mean, when you're in your 20s and like your brain is still forming, you're not always thinking about those things, whether you're, cis or trans. I think that's across the board. Just people, we tend to make really dumb decisions in our 20s and spend our 30s, kind of cleaning that up.
Yeah. And, you know, I, I don't know if, I don't know how, people will take this, but I just notice people who are really good looking are a little crazier, because they're good looking and they can get away with stuff. And,
It's
you
definitely
know,
not always the case. I've known
it's not
I
always the case.
there
It's
was
not a blanket statement.
there was one woman that my ex worked with at the club who was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, probably in my life in person. Like, and was the kindest, smartest. Like, I think she graduated not too long ago from vet school, and it's just brilliant and amazing and wonderful. But again, if you just saw her, she would. When I first saw her, I was too intimidated to talk to her because she was just absolutely gorgeous. And I met this woman while she was topless, and so that, which added like that layer of like, I was just flop sweat, just it was awful. And but she again was just the kindest, sweetest, smartest human being that, and I'm like, you don't, and also very very funny. And I'm like, do you understand that like you look like that and you don't have to have all of those things? Like, I'm fully glad that you do. That's wonderful. But like, it's terrific that like you didn't actually have to compensate for anything, and yet you have all, you were literally the whole package. So yeah, I there's probably some truth in that, but it's there's I think maybe she's the exception that proves the rule, maybe. Yeah, just so. But yeah, I mean, I think though, I think there's probably some truth in that. But yeah, again, I blanket statements, I just, yeah.
Well, it's not a blanket statement. I'm just it in my life,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I don't disagree with that in my personal experience. Yeah, yeah.
I yeah. But let's get off that topic now. Um, as trans people, we always want to have surgeries, and we want to. Well, not all of us, but our generation, I've noticed, want to have surgeries and hormones and stuff like that. And I know there are some people that are scared to do it, or some people that are doing it really fast. That are, hormones 6 months, top surgery, then bottom surgery, all within a year or 2 years.
Yeah,
How did surgeries help with your dysphoria?
they helped a lot. So my top surgery did remove a lot of dysphoria, not having to bind anymore. And I mean, I don't know if this is true for you or for other trans folks, but I even still, I've had my top surgery was about 4 years ago now, and I still have nightmares where like I have to bind, or like I still have my chest, or and I know that that's psychological because when I wake up, like it's flat, it's fine. But like in my head, I think I still have that insecurity of like, oh, people will know because of, which is ridiculous. Um, but it helped a lot with just my confidence, with my posture, with being able to walk in a room with my head like truly held high. Um,
Yeah.
but I think with my bottom surgery, so I haven't had extensive bottom surgery, but I did have hysterectomy, vaginectomy, kind of everything removed, and I think it would have helped a lot more with my dysphoria had I not had the complications that I had. I had a post-op infection that lasted. I mean, it stuck around pretty extensively for about 6 months. I mean,
Oh,
it was bad. I mean, I was hospitalized twice. I had to have, another surgery. When all what was said and done, which finally cleared it away. But it still took almost. I mean, it was at least a year, almost two, before I'd like fully healed. And I think for me that took away some of what would the like some of the factor of easing my dysphoria is just having to go through and deal with all of that. But I think now that I am fully healed, it definitely has helped tremendously and just kind of feeling more comfortable with myself and feeling more okay with my body. Yeah.
and yeah, I know my top surgery was amazing, and it helped so much because I didn't know what the like I knew I had these things, but they were so far removed from myself, and I was so disconnected from them,
Mhm.
and I was very active, and I wasn't out to everybody. So I'd go scuba diving with a binder on, and like it just my back always hurt. I don't know if my back still hurts from wearing binders all those years. Um,
I will
but
say that I'm pretty sure it is the reason that I have mild asthma today. I got when I was binding, I probably got there was one year where I got bronchitis like 4 times in one year. And it was really just because I was binding so much and so long that my it just there wasn't a lot of moving the fluid in my lungs, and it would get trapped, and I would get bronchitis again, and it would be terrible. And if you've never had bronchitis, first of all, consider yourself lucky, because like you literally feel like you were hacking up a lung. It is terrible. It is awful. But since top surgery, I haven't really had nearly as much bronchitis. But if I and I've looked at my own X-rays and looked at MRIs that I've had done, and if you look closely, you can kind of see where when I was really young, when I first started binding, when I was like 16, 17 years old, I wasn't doing it properly. I was using an overly tight sports bra, and like I just essentially what I did to my ribs was I literally like you can kind of see where they sort of curve in a little bit, right where
yeah,
I properly binding. And that damage will probably be with me for, I mean, probably the rest of my life in some form. And like I said, I do have mild asthma. It's not terrible. Like I've got, a rescue inhaler that I have to hit every now and again, but it's not awful. But it's one of those things that like now when I see, especially young guys who are like, yeah, I want to bind for like 12 hours a day. I'm like, please don't, please don't. Like, even if you just take it off in the bathroom for 5 minutes and cough a few times, even that is better than like binding straight from like for like 12 hours at a time, or like binding super tightly with sports bras or this that, and the other. I'm like, please just take care of your ribs, take care of your lungs. You have this body for the rest of your life, and I know it's not what you want now. I fully understand that it is not the situation that you want for the rest of your life right now, but you've got to remember that you've got to still protect your body and take care of your body until you get to that point where it does feel like yourself and where you're not detached from it. And that's difficult. That's certainly easier said than done, but just definitely don't f up your ribs. Don't f up your ribs. Don't, please be kind to your ribs and to your lungs. That's I if I have to give a blanket PSA to our entire community, please be careful with your ribs. Yeah.
yeah. My binders were so tight that I would sleep in them. I'd wake up in them. I wouldn't take them off
Yep.
until I was like couldn't take it anymore. So I'd go days without taking it off,
Oh, yeah.
and I was just like, because it was just too hard to get on and off all the time. So I was like, I'm just going to keep it on, and I don't even. I just remember it was so tight all the time, and I'd have like lines on my body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially for bigger guys and bigger guys in the South where it gets real hot. I mean, it's North. I mean, I'm sure in Southern California it gets hot as hell too, but North
Probably
Carolina.
not the same hot.
Oh, real? Okay, yeah. See, yeah, it's. I mean, it gets so hot, and with bigger guys, like myself, like I would get like a heat rash. Like it was terrible. So I eventually, and I recommend this now to younger guys who are binding, is use like a drying agent, like a powder, or even like a non gel, like a powder deodorant, just to like reduce some of the moisture, especially under your chest, just and around like under your armpits and around, sort of when the where the binder goes down and rubs, because it'll chafe, you'll get heat, like
Oh yeah.
bad rashes. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, powders, and I also recommend a little bit, to if you can find it and you can afford it, to get a binder that actually has like a zipper or a clasp or something where once you put like it's loose when you put it on and take it off, but you can tighten it once you have it on. And I think that that's, I mean, certainly helps a lot of, for the, literally having to, I know, I don't know about you, but I've gotten stuck in binders before and like, had to like really struggle to get them off because it was like one solid piece. And for me,
Yeah.
I that like just having a zipper, even on the side or on the front or whatever, just made it easier to take on and off, and it encouraged me to take it off and on, to take it off when I needed to, and when I really needed to like let my skin and my body breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh, the
it's
things we do to ourselves.
oh yeah, oh god, yeah, the things that we do to ourselves. But yeah, I mean that's certainly what one of the biggest things that I recommend now to guys is like please do your research in binding, and please be careful, because you can do so much damage, and it's again we have to live with our bodies for the rest of our lives.
I agree.
Yeah.
I now what how have you changed from beginning your transition to now? Like have you like your ideas have changed, your idea of what manhood is? What do you think is different about you when you started transitioning to now?
I definitely, when I first started transitioning, overcompensated a little bit, and I think was a little bit more macho than really who I am as a person. Because I bought into that whole like, well, to be a man, you have to be super masculine and whatever. And after I'd been on testosterone for a year, after I'd started having surgeries and things like that, I was like, I don't. That's not who I am as a person. Like I'm not. I'm very much an intellectual. I still enjoy things that are more traditionally feminine. My mom taught me how to knit when I was a kid, and sometimes for stress relief I'll knit or I'll color, which aren't really the most traditionally masculine things, but for me it helps, and it's something that I
Right.
enjoy doing. And so I think as I've sort of moved through my transition, I've let go of a lot of that sort of machismo, like hyper masculinity thing that I was holding on to, and that I was displaying, and it really it allowed me to really be a more authentic version of myself, and to really, I mean, honestly, feel much more comfortable in who I am and in my identity. And but I think that part of that was that I had the luxury of growing up in a home where um, we never really the traditional hyper masculinity that is expected was never really something that was enforced in my household. My both of my brothers were artists. My younger brother, he's a Marine, but he went to Cuba when Obama went a few years ago for the first time, and my mom showed me a picture and she kind of laughed. She's like, "You can tell that my son is secure in his masculinity because all of his buddies are in like baggy t-shirts and baggy shorts that go down to their knees, and they're just super uncomfortable. And my brother is in like a linen button up with like some coral short shorts and like looks comfortable as hell." And she was like, "Yeah, that's my kid. You can 100% tell because he didn't give a shit about anybody giving him any hassle, because he was like, I'd rather be comfortable and be not sweltering in this ridiculous heat, and
Yeah.
than to be super masculine and super just super manly. So yeah, it was never. I definitely got that, that sort of mindset of the hyper masculinity early on from, not just really cis guys. It was a lot of trans guys because I think, a lot of us sort of in our early transition, especially, have this idea that if we're not super manly, then nobody's going to take us seriously as men. And
Right.
that's not the case. And I think that's something that you have to learn. I don't know that that's something that,
Yeah.
by me saying that you don't have to do that, I don't know that there are a lot of guys who are going to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to let that go right now. And that's going to be the end of it. But I think a lot of us do feel like we have to overcompensate a lot in that regard. And I think that's a falsehood that is kind of going away a little bit. I've noticed, especially with younger guys. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to be super manly and super macho to be a man. It's not a requirement. You have to be yourself and be comfortable in who you are.
Yeah. My family, I don't know if I would consider my family very macho. My dad cries during church when he feels the spirit. We all like dancing for the most part. Like my brother taught me swing dancing when I was like in elementary school. Um, my brother was a Marine, but I don't, I don't know, like, I don't know if I would consider our family hyper masculine. My brother likes to cook.
Yeah.
Um, my brother and his girlfriend, they grow plants. I think we're, just really kind of corny people, and we're kind of goofy people. I know I was a lot more machismo and it was like women have to do this and men have to do this. And I know that as I grew up and became comfortable in myself and was seen as a man, I don't think I could have changed if I wasn't seen as a man. But because I was seen as a man, I think I was able to accept that, okay, some people might think I'm gay, some people might not. I think as long as the person I'm sleeping with in a relationship doesn't think I'm gay, then it's pretty good to go for me.
Yeah.
But I've really had to look at, sorry, that's my dog.
That's okay.
I think as long as like, hold on. When she hears loud noises outside, she has to like defend the house's honor or something.
Of
But
course.
she doesn't bark
Yeah.
outside.
You're,
She's like, I'm tough, but she's kind of a wuss and she runs away from little dogs barking at her. And she's a big dog.
Yeah, my cat does the same thing, except she's literally 9 pounds. And I'm like, if you're not scary, nobody is scared of you. But she definitely talks a big game. And then my 3-year-old godson terrifies her. And I mean, he's only about maybe 3.5 feet tall, maybe. And just like, that scares she tries to be big and tough. She'll meow at him and hiss, and no. At the end, if he gets like within 2 feet and she's not ready for it or he's wound up, nope, she'll bolt every single
That's
time. But she talks a big game. Yeah, she talks a big game.
it's sweet of her. It's
Yeah,
sweet of my dog too, because I know she probably sounds vicious outside of my house, but that's as all as it does. It doesn't do anything else.
yep. Mm-hmm.
She's kind of a baby.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
but like I was saying, like I think, and I even tried to break saying like a lot because I always saw that women said like all the time. I think it is also something because I'm from Orange County originally.
Yeah,
And I all this perceivedhood that I have to be a certain way. I don't have to be anything but like a good person and someone who's loving and not, prejudice, and I don't hurt children, and I want to someday have a family and support them. I think that's kind of, as long as you can take care of your family and you protect the people you love, whether that's emotionally, physically, or you're at least supportive. I think that is more important than if you have the biggest muscles in the world,
yeah,
um, or if you have the most amount of money, but then you're never there, just trying to figure out what kind of person I want to be.
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that had I not sort of moved away from that macho ideal of manhood, I probably would not have gone into the profession that I'm going to. Let's see, we're in February. So I'm about 3 months away from graduating with my master's in social work, which, if you know anything about social work, is a, yeah, then there we go. Yeah, right on to the next, good segue. Um, it's social work is very female dominated. I
Yeah,
mean, I would say probably in my cohort, it's like 75 to 80% women, I think. I mean, it's a lot of women, and they're like, I think the most number of guys in my class, including myself, I that I've ever had, I think was like five, compared to like 15, 20 women. Um, and so it's definitely not a field that you see men go into a lot. Um, but at the same time, I originally wanted to go into medicine and be a doctor, and I still haven't. I've still definitely been kicking around the idea of going back and doing med school to become an endocrinologist to be able to prescribe testosterone. But I have always been really fascinated with the human mind. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology, a bachelor's of science in psychology, and I have for a very long time wanted to become a therapist, which is what I hope to do when I graduate. Currently, I'm specializing in um, alcohol and drug and substance use disorder and addiction. And in that field, it's a very takes one to know one environment. And I've been in recovery myself from alcohol for a number of years. Um, but it's also one where, they really need somebody who is just understanding and non-judgmental and who will treat them like a human being, because
right.
a lot of people in society, and I mean, I'm sure you know this, a lot of people in society will, kind of write people who suffer from substance use disorder off and say, well, you're just an addict, you're just this, you're just that, you're just, and it's like they're just people. They're just people, and a lot of them are very sensitive people. And I
Most of us are sensitive.
yeah,
That's part of our.
most of us are really sensitive people, and it's like they just need somebody to treat them like a human being, for God's sake. And it's somebody to not judge them when they tell you that they have had to do survival sex work, and and that kind of sort of goes double in the LGBT community, which also has a large population of people who do survival sex work, and also people who are substance users. And ultimately, what I want to do with my life and my career is work with LGBT, particularly trans folks, just to be able to be someone who can hold a just a non-judgmental holding environment for them, and give them a safe place to actually talk to a therapist who understands a little bit about what they're going it through, and a little bit about their community. And so really the biggest reason that I chose to go into social workers, because I really did. I've been the first time I remember holding a therapeutic environment for somebody, I think I was about 7 years old, and my mother, and I tease my mom about this a lot, but my mom was working in the emergency room at the time at our local hospital, and a little girl came in who was the daughter and granddaughter of two women that she worked with at other parts in the hospital. And she was really, 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 really sick. She actually had a heart condition that had killed a kid in my neighborhood, like around the corner from me, maybe a year or two before. And by some miracle, this little girl survived. But there was a lot of talk that she needed a heart transplant, and she was on a lot of medications, and she was still not out of the woods. And so my mother, in her infinite wisdom, sent me on a play date with this little girl to like kind of suss out what she knew, and like what her understanding of the situation was. And I went in, and we spent the day together, and she talked to me about her medicine, and how she was aware that she could die still. And she was worried about leaving her mother and her grandmother behind, because she was an only child and she lived with them. And um she was very concerned about that. And like as an adult, I look back on that and I'm like, Mom, what, how did you, what? And she was like, and I brought this up to her like a year ago, and we were on the phone, and she was like, listen, you know as well as I do that had you known that there was a situation like that where you could have helped and I did not give you that opportunity, you would have been legit pissed at me. Like you would have been livid that I did not give you that opportunity. And I was like, yeah, that's you make an excellent point. But at the same time, like it's something that I've always tried to be, a non-judgmental, calming presence. I can't even tell you how many panic attacks I have talked people through. It's like a specialty of mine at this point. Like, if you're ever in need of somebody to talk to through a panic attack, just give me a call. We'll work through it. But it's something that I not only did I find that I have kind of a knack for. I enjoy putting people at ease, and I enjoy sort of creating that environment where someone feels safe enough to talk about the worst things that have ever happened in their life. And that's kind of what drove me into it is really just wanting to knowing that I wanted to be someone who could make someone else feel safe enough to unpack their past trauma or their insecurities or whatever it may be that they're dealing with. And it takes a lot to walk with someone through working through their demons, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I don't think that there's anything else that I would rather do in my life. I just feel very much that I'm in the right spot doing this career.
Yeah, my mom called me the little therapist because I would give people advice. Um, since a young child, you know, in elementary school, I would go and help all the other students with their homework, but then I wouldn't do my homework. Um, I always wanted everybody, and I think that's just part of my natures. I've always wanted to help.
Yeah,
I didn't want anybody to feel alone because I know I felt alone a lot and I felt misunderstood a lot. And I just didn't want anybody to feel that way. I don't think I knew consciously that's what I was doing at the time. But looking back as an adult, like I, it was also kind of codependent because if I made somebody else feel better, then I was okay,
yeah,
so semi selfish, but I didn't, realize that at the time either, you
yeah.
know.
And that's something that you work through when going into the helping profession. You sort of have to work through, like, if you're not dealing with your own past traumas, if you're not dealing with your own stuff, you can't really ask another. And I have a professor who says this all the time. You cannot ask a client to do work that you were unwilling to do. And
Right.
and that's absolutely spot on. So, I've been in therapy myself for God, on and off for 12 years, definitely a dedicated 10 years in there of just, working through my shit basically in therapy, and just, going to another person and saying like, I don't feel okay today, or and I talked a lot with my current therapist who I've been seeing for almost a year now. And she was like, you're good at talking about like your past trauma, you're good at talking about like your childhood trauma, you're good at talking about, things regarding, being trans, but you're not really super great at like being vulnerable and telling people how you feel in the moment. And so that's something that
Yeah.
I'm working on.
Too.
I struggle with. Yeah. Cause it's, and it goes back to like, always feeling sort of misunderstood. And, I've probably, there are literally about 3 people in my life right now who I can say just fully get me, and, that I can reach out to at any time. And they always, know the perfect thing to say, or, even if they don't, they know, just what I need in that moment, even if it's just like a heart emoji, like even if it's something really small. And so, just having that understanding presence in the people in my life. Like I said, I have 3 best friends. I'm so fortunate. One that I live with, and 2 that live, one in North Carolina and one in Texas. And the 2 that have lived far away have been my best friends for God, 10 years at least. I think, one of them more, a little bit more than that. I think I've known them since I was 20. But I'm so blessed to have at least a few people in my life that I really fully feel like they understand me, which definitely
Yeah.
helps to, not feel so misunderstood all the time, which, a lot of us grow up feeling.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important. I think what I think it's great about young kids transitioning now is that they have some people, not everybody, of course, has people that see them or that aren't pushing them. Because I don't ever think we should push anybody for anything. We should support them and kind of let them lead the way. Um, and I know all I've ever wanted is to feel like I belong somewhere, not to feel like I'm a freak,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um, having other people in the media or just not giving up on myself and not giving up on people who do care about me has also been helpful, but also learning how to talk to myself better, saying loving things to myself when I feel like I've made a mistake,
Yeah.
not holding myself to perfection, which I have a tendency to do,
Yep.
um, being kinder to other people than I am to myself. I would never let my friend talk about themselves the way I've talked to myself,
Yeah.
and so working on loving that little kid who was hurt as a child and who felt misunderstood, um, and everything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually do. Right now I'm working at with a residential rehab facility at my internship, and I'm doing their intensive outpatient program. It's a 3 hour group 4 times a week, and I do two of the groups per week. And one of the things that um, the way that I structure my group is I kind of build on each week, and so like last week we talked about self compassion, and the on Tuesday and then on Thursday we talked about self care. And I said, when was talking to my group, I said the reason I'm doing this is because you do need to learn self compassion and being kind to yourself before you can really get onto the applied part of that, which is self care and taking care of yourself. And because I think a lot of us forget that we talk to ourselves more than we talk to literally anybody else in the world combined. We talk to
Yeah.
ourselves constantly. And so if we're constantly telling ourselves like you're stupid or you're lazy or you're this or you're that or da, 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 and being very negative, that's sort of the soundtrack that we adopt for our lives. And I mean, I can tell you that I'm terrible at that. I've had struggled with it and worked on it for years now, and I'm still not terrific, but changing the way that I talk to myself and changing the language that I use with myself, and really just being kinder and more compassionate to myself has just absolutely changed the way that I look at the world. I mean, the world is a much more positive place when you can start from a place of being kind to yourself. You just kind of tend to find more kindness in the world when you can start from a base of being kind to yourself, I think.
I think so. We need to wrap up. So, thing I want to ask, which is kind of the basis of the channel, is what are some things that you wish you knew prior to transitioning, maybe to save you some grief, save you some pain, or even positive things.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things really is that is just to have more confidence in myself. I think that I kind of had passing privilege from pretty early on in my transition, um, but I think even now I still sort of second guess myself and think, oh my god, there's something about me that people are going to automatically pick up on, and that's they're going to automatically know that I'm trans, and I am surprised literally all the time by the fact that most people don't pick up on it. I mean, even I've known even other trans guys who didn't pick up on, my being trans. And so I think really just having that confidence in myself and knowing early on that I was getting the results that I wanted, even though psychologically it was hard for me to see, I think
Right.
having confidence probably would have helped me a lot early on in my transition and just in my life in general. Um, and really just uh, being patient just with transition, and with the changes that you're going to make. You kind of mentioned earlier about how a lot of younger guys are sort of getting everything done within a year, and it's not that I think that's a mistake. I mean, it's the opposite. I'm overjoyed that folks are able to do that, but I think for me that would not have worked, because I think for me, um, it really took, kind of needing to settle out in my body and my hormones. It took, extra time for me to heal. It took, um, just time for me to accept myself before I started on those bigger steps. And I think had I
Right.
not done that, I would not be as confident as I am today. I mean, if I had done everything within a year, I would not have, my body wouldn't have had time to heal. And so I think that's, something that I hope that, younger, especially, young trans guys are thinking about is, give yourself time, give yourself, it's not a race. Transition is not a race. We all go at our own paces. It's very individual for all of us. And comparing yourself to other people is always going to be, you're always going to be shooting yourself in the foot if
Right.
you're doing that. So really, I mean, just allow yourself that time. Allow yourself and your body the time to adjust to testosterone. Things change and settle in the first 2-3 years where your body is like really just trying to get used to it.
Yeah.
Allow yourself time to heal after surgery. Allow yourself um, just allow yourself to be patient. Allow you to be patient with yourself and your body and your transition and your journey, because I think patience really takes you a long way. But again, I'm the worst at it. I literally on my arm, and I don't know if you can see this on camera, but my tattoo says "Patience, man, patience," and it's literally a reminder to myself always that I need to be more patient. So that's why that I think is why I say that I wish that I had known that and had that is I think I wish I had been a little bit more patient with myself, and again compared myself less to other people because I'm an individual, and so are you, and so are all of us. So it's my transition is not going to look like yours or anybody else's, and so
Correct.
that's really important to keep in mind as you go through the process and this journey.
Yeah, I think that's important too. I just things I I wish I would have had my top surgery sooner, but I worked out a lot before I had my top surgery, and my top surgery was amazing because all my muscles were there. So I always look like I have pecs, whether I work out or not. Um, you know, I wish I would have done more voice therapy, but I'm doing it now. I'm just my journey is my journey. And just like when my brother went through all his hormonal changes, he didn't know what the heck was going on either.
Yeah,
And I think it takes times for a biological male. Well, I know it takes time for biological males to go through puberty. So I just think if you're going to do it, give yourself some times for the hormones to settle in because they're so strong. They can change a lot of your personality if you're not doing it right. And it can make you really aggressive or make you break out too much or make you really hungry. Then you gain a bunch of weight. And then, you got to just, I think, starting slow and being patient and then feeling out like what's going on inside me because I'm not perceived the way I want to.
yeah.
And the more I was accepting of myself, that's when the surgeries were affirming. That's when it helped. I didn't plan on the surgeries to fix my dysphoria. I just knew it was going to help my dysphoria.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we don't, as a community, I don't think we do enough justice in talking about the fact that there's a significant portion of us who, after surgery, do suffer from depression and do suffer from a lot of other things. And I feel like if you're planning your top surgery, for example, 6 months after you start hormones, again, you should go at your own speed, but I think you should also kind of be cognizant of the fact that testosterone really messes with your emotions in a lot of different ways that until your body really gets used to it and settles down, are sort of unforeseeable. So, in a lot of ways, it can really exacerbate and make worse a lot of the depression and a lot of things that come after surgery that, again, we don't really talk about as often as a community as maybe we should. Because, I know for me, like, especially after my bottom surgery, when I was going through all those complications, like there was definitely a significant, depression and significant just, feeling of just general crumminess. And I don't know how, if I would have, I feel like it would have been a lot worse had I not, had I gone, moved through it a lot faster.
Right.
than if I had done it on my timetable and really done it as, a separate, and, for a couple years after my top surgery. I
Yeah.
think it would have been quite a bit worse as far as healing goes.
Yeah, for sure. I know that, like, for some people, well, your body's recovering, so you just have to be patient. Like, I took so much time to recover from my top surgery because I didn't want my scars to be bad. I didn't go in the sun for a year. Well, I still really don't go in the sun with my shirt off. I think that's just from being raised Mormon, and
I
but
was gonna say I
but
don't
like,
like I'm literally I sunburn if I look outside on a hot day. Like
yeah,
I'm so pale that
yeah,
I'll get second degree sunburn if I take off my shirt outside. So I try to avoid the sunshine as much as possible. So I definitely get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah. But I'm grateful, even through the pain and the struggle of having to wait. I'm grateful because I had to learn how to accept what I have and who I am, and not I didn't have other people, like, I had other people saying, "Oh, you look like a dude," and stuff like that. But I really had to learn how to accept myself. So it's been very helpful in that sense. But I do
Yeah.
still get impatient sometimes. But that's just human nature, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think we all do. I think I mean there are still some days where I look in the mirror and I'm like, yeah, I don't see it. I don't, but it's like I know other people do. I mean, but it's really just having to accept it in yourself and having to um kind of make that yeah, I mean it's a transition in your own mind as well. Because I mean
Right,
obviously we are the people that we are from, the time that we're young, a lot of us, but you know, it's it's like losing weight. Like it's hard to see when you lose weight because you are with your body every single day and that change is so gradual that like it's you can't, it's hard to see because you're literally in your body. But, somebody who hasn't seen you for, a few months and you've lost, 20, 30 pounds are just blown away. And I think transition is kind of similar in that because a lot of our changes are very gradual. Like, I didn't even realize in the first year or two that my voice had dropped as much as it had. And I ran into somebody that I hadn't seen, in a few months since before I started testosterone. And he was like, oh my God, like it's so deep. Like I can't believe it. Like I can't, it was just, but like for me, like I didn't even hear like I didn't even notice the change because I heard
right,
myself. Like and it was so gradual that like, it sounded like it had, before I started testosterone in my own head, but,
right.
other people all, it's so, and I think that's, one of the other frustrating things is that again, most of the time other people see the changes long before we even really start to notice them. So, it can be difficult in that regard. Um, but I mean, knowing that like the changes again, it seems like they move at a glacial speed, but a lot of times it is really very quick, and it's you look back and you realize how fast it was, and it blows your mind. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, it took me 7 years to grow facial hair, but now that I grow it, like, it's annoying to have to shave it.
Yeah, yeah. I it took me
It's
about
itchy.
yeah, it
It's
took me
so
about
itchy.
3 years. It took me about 3 years to grow it, and then I didn't even fully like because I was still shaving all the way down. I had like a goatee, just a little like the mustache and like a little chin beard for a while, and I was in a psychiatric hospital for a week, and I couldn't shave. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that it was like coming in evenly, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder what happens if I don't shave it." And I've pretty much kept a beard ever since. Yeah. So
Yeah, I I get that's too hot for me. My face would get really warm, and I itch. I can feel the hairs growing when they're uneven. I don't
yeah.
know. It's like
See,
an
I live in
OCD.
Michigan now though, and it's nice. It's nice in the winter to have like just that one little extra layer of like fuzz to keep you warm because it's so freaking cold up here. Definitely
Yeah.
not what I'm
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I know we will talk outside of this. Um, is there any last things before we go that you want to share?
No, I think that we've kind of covered just about all of it. But thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I look forward to seeing how it ends up, and I'm so jealous of your background. I've got to figure out how to do that.
I
I
took
think,
a picture. I took a picture and it just pops up now. No, it's
oh,
actually it's OBS. Is it OBS? It's one of my screen capture thing. I don't know. I'm still learning all this technology. We didn't have all this. There's so many different programs, and I feel completely idiotic, but
no.
I'm learning them slowly. So
You know what? We're kind of all learning a lot of this virtual stuff on camera and everything together. So yeah, that's definitely one of those things that like we'll get there. We'll get there.
we
But thank
will.
you so much. I really appreciate it, and I think it was a fantastic talk. All
Thank you.
right,
Ciao.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.